welcome to another episode of the Whole Note podcast. My name is Shin-Young Kim, and today we are joined by violinist Kevin Lin. Kevin currently serves as the concertmaster of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. We sat down as he shared with us what it's like to live a life as a concertmaster, both artistically on stage and administratively off. Kevin also shared with us his life overseas as he served as a co-leader of the London Philharmonic Orchestra prior to joining the Indianapolis Symphony. Kevin also shared with us some intimate details of his life as a student at the Curtis Institute of Music, where he studied with the late great violinist Aaron Rosan. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Shinyan. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Kevin, I'm really excited to pick your brain a little bit about life as a concertmaster. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about your life prior to joining the Indianapolis Symphony. So, while you were a student at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, I understand that you had the opportunity to study with the late, great violinist Aaron Rosan, who passed away about 5 years ago now. And I'm guessing that was probably such an immense privilege to be able to study with such a legend whom many consider to be one of the last great romantic violinists of the 20th century. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that work was like and how he helped shape your outlook on music?
Sure. Yeah. No, it was. Yeah. So I had always heard about Aaron Rosan. I actually didn't um, know very much about him until I got to university, and I did my undergrad at Colburn, and I think a lot of my friends there had studied with Rosan at at a younger age, and they were all incredible violinists, and they all had like this really special sound. I was like, oh, it's something special here, but none of them really sounded the same. So I was very interested in a teacher that was able to help me find something special as opposed to like a teacher that was like, oh, we're all going to play this way. And that, because like that kind of teaching kind of, I don't like the cookie cutter type of playing so much. So when I got the opportunity to study with Rosan, I definitely jumped on it. And, lessons with him were really interesting. So he, at the time, I think was based in like Connecticut or something, and he would come down to the Curtis Institute once every 2 weeks. And so we didn't have weekly lessons, but we would have lessons every 2 weeks, and they'd be like 2 hours long. Um, and so it actually gave us more time to practice and develop our own sound individually. And then you would just have like a really intense two hour session or something like that, where he would basically just play the violin with you. So he could play everything you were playing, but memorized, and also just like play circles around you. And mind you, this guy was like in his 80s or something like that. He's as old, and he's like hunched over in this with this like cigarette and cigar smelling Vion violin. So it was really what really stuck with me was like the ability to be in the presence of this like insane legend. And he had a way of pushing his students where he didn't want to hear the same repertoire twice. So like if you brought it for a lesson, that's all he just spent 2 hours on it. He taught it to you. He doesn't want to hear it again. Next week he wants you to bring in a new concerto or like a new piece. Um and this is just how he works. He's just like, oh, as violinists, we need to have all of this repertoire in our system. Like there's no point playing it twice because like you're wasting my time basically. And there's a funny story with that. I was preparing for a competition, so I think I brought Mendelssohn concerto and some other stuff, I think twice, because I was like in the process of preparing for it, and he got so mad at me the second time I brought it around that it was something along the lines of like, oh, this is disrespectful, and like you're wasting my time, and like I think he kicked me out. I think my lesson was only like maybe barely an hour at that time. But like, I mean, it's this kind of like discipline where pushed us extremely hard, um, but then also like played with us to kind of show us how it's done. And I'm a very um, I play I learn the best by seeing things in person and by hearing things. So for me, studying with him was super helpful.
So can
Okay.
you, um, one of the things I really love about Mr. Roseanne's playing is just the beauty in the bow and how he's able to shape phrases with the different colors that he's able to bring out. Did he talk much about that with you in terms of how to go about that, or?
Yeah, I think well, he played everything very simply. Like he one of his most famous phrases was don't make history out of everything. You know,
Mhm.
like not every like so many times we grow up, everyone's like, oh, every note is important. Every
Mhm.
you have to vibrate everything. But
Mhm.
he was kind of the opposite school where he's just like, why why are you making such a big deal out of this such simple phrase?
Mhm.
And a lot of times I find that we overcomplicate things or like we think about things, especially phrases or notes, individual notes, we think about them too much that we're assigning them all this value, but it only makes sense to us. And from an external listener, it's like maybe it really is not that important. And we
Mhm.
have to think about the entire thing more as an entire piece.
Yeah.
Um, but and then it was also the way he vibrates. Like if you see his fingers, like his knuckles are all like weirdly disjointed, and
Yeah.
his nails are weird.
Mhm.
But that's also just it's from like years of playing a very specific way.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's a combination of both. I don't necessarily think it's one thing that he's doing, but it was just like his entire philosophy of like just
Mhm.
like just play it simply,
Mhm.
and he passed that down to us by playing it with us and showing
Yeah.
us how it was done.
Yeah. Wow. That's really something to. That must have been so stressful to know, like you have one shot at playing one piece for him, and that's it. So I'm sure everyone in your studio was just like getting it up to performance level for every lesson, basically.
Everyone in the studio was amazing. I felt
Yeah,
like I
that's
was like the one lagging behind, and everyone else was like, everyone else was winning competitions,
right.
and so it's just like, oh, okay, great. I'm gonna go my concertmaster
Yeah, and actually, that's a great segue to the next topic I wanted to touch on with you. So,
Yeah.
I know that you've definitely competed and had success at various international competitions throughout your life. Um, at what point did you decide to pivot away from competitions and focus on the orchestral route? And did that revelation come with the idea of being a concertmaster?
No, actually. So I think I always knew I kind of wanted to be um in an orchestra. I grew up with my parents taking me to go see the New York Phil pretty often,
Mm.
and the concept of being part of something larger, being the concept of a stable paycheck, the
Yeah.
concept, you know, I think that was kind of like it burned into my head. It was kind of glorified a little bit. I was like, how cool would it be to one day just like sit in the section of like New York Phil or something like that? And so I think from a very young age, I've always been very um, drawn to the concept of orchestra, and also musically for me, like I love very dense harmonies and being part of like being a little cog in something much bigger. And so I've always liked it. I've always liked orchestra, and I think it's for me it was too difficult to be part of a chamber group because it's just like having four like in the case of a quartet having four people get along perfectly well together is
Right.
like a next to impossible. Like imagine like modern day marriages are like hard enough already. Imagine being like married to four people.
Right.
So I was like, that doesn't sound fruitful.
Yeah.
And then, was also very truthful to myself. Like, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are soloists now, and the ability for them to be on for the like 30-40 minute period of time and perform so well, it's just
Yeah.
like something that I don't think I can do on a day-to-day basis. I'm lucky that I solo a couple times a year, but I couldn't do that like week in, week out. So
Mm.
I have always wanted to be in an orchestra, and then like the concertmaster thing,
Hmm.
I think just happened uh, by as a fluke, like
Mm.
I never like gunned for like the concertmaster position. I was always like, oh, how like I would be so lucky if I made like $100,000 in the New York Philharmonic. Like
Mm. Yeah.
I would be living, So, um, but the concertmaster thing just happened because my first job happened to be a co-leader job, and I kind of just rode that train, and it's just kind of what came about. So
Mm.
I am lucky and very fortunate that I'm in the position I am, but it wasn't like a definite goal. I think the goal was to just sit in an orchestra, and collect a steady paycheck.
Right, right. Very pragmatic. Yeah, and that's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like as the concertmaster, to listeners that might not be aware, um, you're basically after the conductor of the orchestra, you're kind of the face of the orchestra, right? In many ways. So can you talk a little bit about the roles and the duties of a concertmaster in a major orchestra and what all that looks like?
Sure. It really depends on like the country you're in.
Sure.
I've worked in London, worked in Asia, I've worked in the States. It really does depend. But like, okay, for the sake for simplicity's sake, let's talk about in the States. Like a concertmaster is a very forward facing job, and in a lot of cases the most consistent high ranking position in an orchestra, because a music director will be there 8 to 10 weeks a year, and then the
Mm.
rest of the time we're working with guest conductors. So I think you need someone in that leadership position there that is more boots on the ground.
Mm.
um, and so it'll be uh, a lot of times I understand how the orchestra works. I know
Mhm.
what the quirks are. I know what the strengths are. And when a guest conductor comes in from like Europe and is like working with our orchestra,
Mhm.
many times I can streamline their process of like, hey, like let's do this here. We're gonna play like this. We're
Mhm.
gonna we have to watch out for this here. This is the kind of stuff that our orchestra needs to work on. So like, if you conducted it this way, or if you helped us like this would be much more successful.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm basically like I always say it's like the traffic cop between the musicians and whoever the conductor is on stage.
Mhm.
And so that's my day in day out. That's like the playing aspect of the job. On
Mhm.
top of that, as a concertmaster, you know you're oftentimes in a lot of committees, whether that
Right.
be like artistic committees
Mhm.
or like feature planning committees with the
Mhm.
orchestra, what we want the orchestra to look like. A lot of times I'm working with the board and the staff to make changes or see what's possible in terms of future outlook,
Mhm.
um, like whether we want to do recording, whether we
Mhm.
want to tour, whether we want to play outreach gigs. A lot of this kind of stuff. I think they also like. I luckily work in an orchestra where they do look for our opinions. So it's also facilitating that on top, and also there are fundraising, you know, uh, situations that I find myself in, because they do use us for a lot for marketing, and
Mhm.
so a lot of our donors and patrons, I guess, find it fun to meet a lot of our musicians, and I oftentimes I'll be the musician representative for the orchestra. So
Mhm.
it's kind of this multifaceted of like, um, semi management planning,
Mhm.
donors and development, and then there's the butt in the seat playing side of the job.
Right. Yeah. And so it sounds like it's a combination of a lot of artistic leadership and administrative leadership.
For
But
sure.
to talk a little bit more about like the nuts and bolts of sitting in a concertmaster's chair, um, was it something that you were, let's say, just naturally like you understood how that position worked, or is that something you had to grow with over time? Like, because I'm sure you've probably sat concertmasters for like different school orchestra concerts, but I'm sure that's probably not obviously like the same as like sitting in a professional orchestra as concertmaster.
Um, I mean, the skills are transferable. I think
Mm.
um, the nuts and bolts. I mean, I think in a professional orchestra, it's a lot easier because everyone kind of knows what's going on already, as opposed to in school orchestra. The front half is trying really hard. The back half never want to be there, or they'll play for 10 minutes, they're all
Right.
asleep.
Right.
We've all been in conservatories, so you know how this works.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and actually, in some cases, professional orchestras, it's the same.
Yeah.
The back half doesn't want to be there. So it just
Yeah.
really depends on which orchestra you're working with.
Right.
Uh, but I don't know. I don't know. I think I've never. It's definitely something that I've learned through the experience, and I think I
Mhm.
was really lucky because like they now that I think back to give a 24-year-old kid the co-leader job in the London Philharmonic is
Mhm.
actually kind of a crazy situation. If I
Mhm.
was given the executive power to whether to do it or not, I don't know
Mhm.
if I would make that same decision to like
Mhm.
offer that job. But I'm very thankful that they took a gamble on me. And
Mhm.
being oblivious when you first walk into the job is so helpful. Like I imagine if you gave someone who actually knew what that job entailed, they would have probably navigated it a lot differently.
Mhm.
Because like I had just graduated from Curtis. Like I was very
Mhm.
lucky, everything lined up perfectly.
Mhm.
I walked into my LPO job just like thinking it was like a summer festival sort of situation. I didn't
Mhm.
like actually realize how important of a job that was and how
Mhm.
big. I mean, like we were touring like 3, 4 times, like major times a
Yeah.
year, and
Yeah.
like we're talking major tours, like weeks at a time.
Right.
Um, and so I just thought that was kind of cool, and I was just
Yeah.
like this happy-go-lucky, innocent-minded kid.
Right.
Um, and so like I was telling the old British, like the seasoned veteran British players, like, oh
Mhm.
no, we gotta play like this. Oh, we gotta do this.
Mhm.
We gotta do that. And they were all like extremely kind. Maybe they thought it was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is cute. Like some American young kid is gonna come in and tell us what to do.
Right.
And they always like respected me and gave me the time of day. And like
Mhm.
I think that built a lot of confidence in me. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, I know what works, I know what doesn't work.
Mhm.
And I was afforded this environment where they were all extremely, extremely kind and helpful.
Mhm.
And so, one, I built the confidence to do it, and two, like if I ever made a mistake, I
Mhm.
was never like crucified for the mistake. They all
Right.
always like, oh, maybe this is slightly better, maybe that is
Mhm.
slightly better. Um, but it also takes, a little bit of ego checking on your part to be like,
Mhm.
okay, I can't just always tell people what to do. I need to absorb everything that's happening around me, um, so that I can learn this job as quickly as possible. So it's a combination of both.
Okay. Well, and I'm curious, prior to you landing the London Phil job, did you play for any concertmasters throughout like the US? Because I know oftentimes teachers that have that concertmaster experience will sometimes work with students or work with people that are taking these auditions and kind of um, I guess give suggestions on how to lead the orchestra or lead the section with gestures and things like that. Is that something that you had any experience with before you landed the London job or
I had lessons on like excerpts.
right?
I definitely played for a lot of people, a lot of concertmasters, but no one really teaches like leading, how to lead. And
Oh,
I honestly like I wouldn't know how to either. Just
mhm,
it's such a individual and it's such an individual thing. And so
Mm,
like if I taught it to someone else, I think it would come off as not genuine. And everyone leads so different. But I think the best way to practice and train for it is
mm,
actually to play quartets or play chamber music, play in small
mm,
ensembles.
mm.
Because that's, how you lead your quartet or your other members is
Right.
exactly what is going to be helpful for an entire section.
Mm,
So I don't think you should necessarily force the
mm,
way you're leading because like
mm,
you go to any orchestra concert, you can tell like who's
mm.
like, oh, they practice that, and it
Yeah.
won't feel genuine.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's a lot of times you'll see principals or like it's not organic.
Mm,
But then the I in my opinion the really great leaders are the ones that just do it naturally. Like they
yeah.
don't like I don't think it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna cue it exactly at this time right now, and like this is the type of cue. I never think about this kind of stuff. I'm just like
Mm,
I'm gonna play in a way that makes sense to the music, and if I'm gonna make sure to play it in time with I don't know X, Y, and Z, whoever is playing with me at the time. I need to listen to their subdivisions. I need to listen to um, the bass line over there. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going on in my head. I'm always like, who am
mm,
I playing with? Who am I listening to?
mm.
I'm never thinking it's like, okay, this I'm gonna cue right here. We're all gonna come in here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people times your section and other people will look to you as to when to play
Mhm.
and how to play it, but they won't like just because you do that cue doesn't mean everyone's gonna come in
Sure.
perfectly in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you can just adjust, it's like, okay, I am going to play the way that everyone in a way where it makes sense to everybody. I think that's the best kind of leader.
Hmm. Yeah. And this reminds me because I had your colleague and friend Austin Huntington on a couple episodes ago, and he was
Yep.
sharing with me how looking back on his earlier days as principal of ISO, he was saying that, sometimes he would give critiques that looking back now, he would have probably said it differently. And so
Yeah,
I'm
of
wondering,
course.
like, you probably have those memories where you're like, oh, like I could have like done things a little bit more judiciously, maybe, or I don't know.
I think I don't know. I think I don't regret anything I've ever said, thankfully, because
Right,
I
right.
think I'm more with the camp of like, oh, if you don't need to say something, don't say it. So
Okay.
I actually rarely say anything unless it's like a bowing change
Mm-mm,
or there was something like, for example, today we're in Singapore today. I'm
mm-mm,
playing Beethoven 2,
mm,
and in the slow movement, there's this weird trill stuff, and every conductor wants to play it differently, and it's like
mm,
not the way it's actually written in the music.
mm,
Like for example, that kind of stuff that you have to demonstrate and you have to talk about.
mm.
But a lot of times, like if we play through something and it's not together, it'll probably be fine the second or third time. Like
Right, right, right.
and and you also have to think. You also have to empathize in a way where it's like, okay, you're in the back of the section. You've played in this orchestra 20, 30 years.
Mm.
Just because it's not together once, you don't want to be scolded by some like kid in the front on the first time. Like just trust them that it'll be fine. And
Yeah.
so putting yourself in their shoes and imagining and thinking about what they need and where they're at is actually, I think, is a great leadership skill, a necessary leadership skill.
Yeah.
And so, also just having trust. And a lot of times, like the first rehearsal, just I don't say anything because a lot of things will naturally fix itself. Like, and to be fair, like you also have to keep in mind, probably 25% of the orchestra didn't look at the music. It's just natural.
Mm,
And so a lot of times first day is just like the sight reading practicing day. And
mm,
oftentimes day two, day three, it'll be fine. And I
mm,
mean, if it gets to the point where it's like dress rehearsal, it's still not together,
mm.
then you can, start putting your foot down. It's like, hey, this is not cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think I've said anything to that I've regretted per
Mm.
se, but I'm sure there are um instances where I felt like I could do a better job,
Sure, sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
But then again, I also looking back, I was like, that's probably the best that I could have done at the time. Like there's no point regretting. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Just move on.
Yeah. Yeah, and moving on now. So you kind of already talked a little bit about your work with the London Phil,
Yeah.
which is where you served as co-leader before joining the
Mhm.
Indianapolis Symphony. So having worked with or having worked professionally both here in the U.S. and overseas in Europe, can you talk a little bit about the differences in the two cultures in terms of just how they go about their business musically,
Musically. Ah, okay. Um,
or just overall, like just
I think it's hard. I've done a bit of guesting in other orchestras, like in the US and
mm,
also in London.
right.
And every orchestra really does have their own personality. It's
Mm,
amazing to see like how differently the ISO plays from Houston Symphony to Cincinnati to Milwaukee to like Pittsburgh. It's every orchestra is different, so I think it's hard to generalize it as a country.
mm,
Um, except for one thing. In the UK, they work so incredibly quick. Like for example,
mm,
the turnaround time is like sometimes they'll do a run out concert.
mm,
It'll be a morning rehearsal and then
mm,
they play the concert in the evening.
mm,
And that's like for a brand new program.
mm,
And so they play the British musicians play so many concerts a year
mm,
that they have like an insane amount of repertoire in their hands where they can just pull out and they can just perform it.
mm,
And so I think the working speed in the UK is so much faster. And because there's like they have to do these insane things, they are so good at playing together.
mm,
Like they know how to put things together incredibly quick.
mm,
And also they sight read like no other orchestra. Like they are the best sight readers in the
mm.
world. Um so that's the UK. But in America it's let's just call it what it is. Like we're it's a luxurious life.
Yeah.
We have so many rehearsals. There's so much time, and we play one program a week.
Mm,
We repeat concerts. There's a lot more opportunities to dive deeper into the music,
mhm,
and we can nitpick little things, and we can explore different bowings, and
mm,
we can do different dynamics this time and this.
mm,
There's a lot more for that, as opposed to in London. They'd be like,
mm.
what the hell are you doing? We have to put this concert together in like 3 hours.
Mm,
And also like 9 times out of 10, like we won't actually run through the whole thing
mm.
before the concert. Like we will there will be bits where we are playing for the first time
Oh
in
wow.
London. And so if you're like if you walk in there, you're like, oh, I'm gonna change this phone. I'm gonna like, can we try a different? They'd be like, no, get out of here. Like we're just putting it together. Um, so in that case, the culture is a little bit different that way, where
Mhm.
we have a lot more time in the States to explore these things differently. Um, yeah. So
Wait, so I mean, yeah, that sounds really intense. And you talked about the quick turnaround. So I mean, obviously in a typical uh performance week in the US, you would have one program for two or three concerts. So in London, how would that work? Are you juggling two or three different programs per week basically or
yeah. I don't remember exactly the schedule, but it was something uh like Monday, Tuesday rehearsal,
Mhm,
concert on Wednesday, and
mhm.
then Thursday, Friday rehearsal, concert on Saturday. So
Oh, wow.
so LPO did at least two programs a week,
Oh, wow.
and that's quite normal. And also, to my knowledge, most British orchestras don't repeat programs, so we only play it once
Oh, okay.
because there are so many orchestras in London that like if we play like Mahler 2 in September,
Mhm,
LSO might do it in like February.
mhm,
So like I don't think there's enough orchestras where there's enough repeat so that we only do it once.
mm. Yeah,
Which
and
is why I think we're able to do so many programs.
sure. Well, and can we talk a little bit more about the term co-leader? Because I know in Europe,
Sure.
like Berlin obviously has like several concertmasters or several first principals, and I think a lot of European orchestras kind of fall in that category. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit of what that looks like? Because I'm guessing you probably didn't play every concert then, right? Or
No. but this again, this is like the British system is different.
Mm,
So there is a full-time leader, Peter Schumann, who
mm,
I've learned so much from.
mm,
And so because the workload is so heavy in London, because they're doing two programs,
mm,
that on top of that, there's like recordings and
mm,
touring. It is quite a lot for one person to be the sole concertmaster
mm,
of the orchestra. And so I came in as co-leader. Technically, I was like the younger person,
mm,
and he's definitely the primary leader of the LPO. So he would do 60% of the leading, and then the rest of the 40% is like what I would pick up if I'm available. And there's
mm,
actually technically also a sub leader. Also, there's number three.
mm,
Um, and so he gets his pick of the first 60% of like the tours he wants to do, the concerts that he wants to lead,
mhm,
and then if he's too busy preparing for something else, then he'd be like, hey Kevin, like here are the programs that I can't do. Can you do these?
mm.
So co-leader is also is kind of like the is a joint between like you lead way more than any sort of associate concertmaster would,
Sure.
um, but you're also afforded those responsibilities of like leading the orchestra on like a 40% basis.
Mm.
Um,
S- mm.
yeah,
Well, so would you sit second chair when he was leading, or would you just not play those programs basically?
yeah, yeah, no, no. Yeah.
Oh,
I would say number two. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Um, but then also, so this actually segues into like the British system where it's like every for most of the major orchestras, I think, except for BBC and Royal Opera House, like
Mm,
we are all per service players. Everybody's a
mm,
per service player.
mm,
Even though you're a full-time musician, you are just guaranteed that you will be asked for every service as a full-time member. But
mm.
we are all paid on the days that we work. So if we don't work, we
Oh,
don't get
wow.
paid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this is just the way LSO, LPO, RPO, Philharmonia.
Yeah,
This is just the way these orchestras work.
yeah.
And so yeah, like if I was able to sit number two, of course it's a day's pay.
Right,
Um, and London is very expensive, and my
right.
situation was slightly different at the time, and I needed to make more money to afford to live in the States.
Mm,
So uh, yeah, you worked as hard as you can, and all the British musicians like definitely bonded over camaraderie, and
mm,
it wasn't exactly the nicest situation for musicians. It just they're so overworked,
mm.
but they play extremely well together. So
Yeah. Well,
different
so
culture.
so was tenure not available to you guys? Was that not really a
No,
thing?
it was. It
Oh, it
was.
was.
So
Okay.
it's the same thing. It was like I can't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years, but after you get the job, so
Mm.
so
No,
when you take let's go back to the beginning, because
sure.
it's so vastly different than like American, um or even actually European. So the
Mm,
British do it so differently.
mm,
So you play one round, and it's not behind a screen. You know we you play one round, and if we like you,
mm.
we'll offer you a trial, but you are consecutively on trial with perhaps 5 to 10 other people.
Okay.
So the second round is kind of like, and they call it on trial, like you come in for weeks at a time to kind of play with us on the job. So you're playing concerts with us. Obviously we're paying you for your time, but like you come in as like a musician on trial, and
Mm,
that process can last anywhere between like 6 months to like years. I've met people that have been on trial for like 2 to 3 years, and it's
oh, wow.
such a crazy and insane process because like you're not afforded any sort of stability.
Right.
Like, oh well, yeah, we got to keep trialing you. Oh yeah, you're doing pretty well, but we also just did another round of auditions where like
Mm,
we got 3 or 4 more trialists, and this can keep going and going and going and going until you
mm,
convince the orchestra that like you are the perfect fit for the orchestra.
mm,
So the audition and trial process itself can last years.
mm.
I was lucky. I think mine lasted 8 months or something like that.
Okay.
Um, and so after you do that, I think it's like a 1 or 2 year tenure process where you're kind of sitting in the seat.
Mm,
And then once you receive tenure, you're technically considered a shareholder of the orchestra.
Mm,
because most of the orchestras in the UK are musician owned. So the musicians run the orchestra. They are the
mm,
ones, musicians hire the CEOs,
mm,
hire the artistic administrators. So it's kind of like an opposite system from what it
mm.
is in the States.
Right. Okay. That's wow. That's got to be really
Massively different.
well. I mean, well, you mentioned like people could be on trial for like years. That like at a certain point, that's
Yeah.
got to be so discouraging. Where you probably want to just move on and try another orchestra if it's taking that long. I would just. I mean.
Sure, but if you're in the UK, they're all like that. So
Oh.
that's just kind of like the system.
Yeah.
That people definitely do jump ship to like
Yeah.
Scandinavia
Right.
or Germany, or I mean, it is so hard winning a US orchestra job that like
Mhm.
people over there are just like, yeah, there's no way I'm winning it. Like
Oh.
like the level at which you have to execute on is insane.
Yeah.
Like for American orchestras, like
Yeah.
we get. I'm sure you've taken auditions. We've
Mm,
all taken
mm.
auditions. You show up. There's like 100, 150 people who all play Don Juan
Right.
perfectly.
Right. Right. Right.
So it's
Yeah.
like any sort of like schmutz or like tiny like blip
Yeah.
could get you cut.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, yeah. It's honestly like I was talking to a friend about this before, where like today's modern orchestra audition, at least in the US, it's equivalent to like going to an international competition just because it's just so hard and the level is so high.
Yeah,
So, but
it's
yeah. Um, can you talk a little bit about the audition process with London orchestras? Is it similar to the US, as in like you play your concerto and your some excerpts, or is it a little bit different, or how does that work?
it's the list is fairly similar. It's just like we'll tell you to bring this list, and then
Mm.
on the day you come, the auditions is like 5 minutes, honestly.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it's not very. The actual playing audition is not very long.
Mm.
It's but it'll be like, yeah, can you play like exposition of a concerto?
Mm.
But what's weird is it's usually with piano. Like we
Oh.
and it's it's non-screen, and you
Mm.
can bring a pianist.
Mm.
Um, and then so you play it, and then if we like you, then we offer you a trial, and then becomes your month to year long process.
Mm.
Um, but it's that there are definitely so the audition process is the same, but it's definitely not as cut and dry as the States ones, where everything's behind a screen, and at least at the ISO,
Mm.
everything is behind a screen until we formally like we offer this person the job.
Mm.
Okay, now who is this person? So we know nothing. We don't know race, gender,
Mm. Right.
religion, whatever. Like
Mhm.
we don't know anything about a person until we have formally dictated, okay, this is the person we're hiring for the year, or for tenure review.
All right.
But in London, it's just like, okay, we see you walk in, okay, and then on top of that, then you're playing with us. We're going out to lunch with you. We're like taking you on tour.
Mhm.
It's very much like a personality. Of course, you're trying to do your best to judge them based solely on their playing.
Mhm.
But then we're also spending way more time with our colleagues than we are with our families.
Mm.
That like a lot of times we are finding someone that we gel with, we work well with.
Yeah.
So there are
Yeah.
so many intrinsic, like there's so many biases that can go
Right.
in that process. But you do find someone that plays with the orchestra extremely well.
Mm.
Whereas in America, like we only hear them. We have no idea how they play in a section until we offer them the job.
Right.
So we could hire somebody and they're just like totally not the right fit
Right.
musically, playing wise, that it's just like, oh my God, we like, so just because we have to be really fair,
Right.
it doesn't necessarily always result in the best candidate. Whereas in London, definitely not the fairest in terms of like biases. But it's almost guaranteed that we will find someone that plays extremely well with the orchestra.
Right. Well, and that's
Yeah.
really interesting because I was listening to a podcast that Brenton Smith, the principal cellist of Houston, was on a couple years ago, and he was talking about the different systems throughout the world. And yeah, I think he mentioned that the London system is most kind of like an interview process where they really like
Yeah.
want to get to know you before like marrying you, I guess. And as opposed
100%, yeah.
as opposed to the US, where it's more like an exam where it's just like you just have to be able to nail everything as accurately as possible. And I mean, I think there's pros and cons to both systems, obviously, but I mean, whatever works, I guess, right?
Whatever works, exactly. And
Right,
there's traditions in every orchestra, and that's what
right.
makes every orchestra sound so different.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, talking a little bit more about auditions. So, um, you've obviously taken some big auditions and had success. And I think all of us as musicians can agree that so much of taking an audition or performing is in the head, right? It's a psychological endeavor, right? So,
100%.
can you share with us some routines or just some things that you've developed in your years of taking auditions that have helped you be in a as optimally focused state of mind as possible for those auditions?
Sure. I think what helped me the most was actually sitting on an audition panel now, like
Mm,
knowing what it's like to be on the other side, knowing what they're listening for on the other side and what the situation is like has actually allowed me to visualize the entire process much more fully.
mm,
So now when I stand, if I'm taking an audition,
mm,
I can picture, I can know exactly what's well, I can't know exactly, but like I know to a fairly high level of certainty of like what they're looking for on the other side or like what their mentality is on the other side. And number one, that puts my mind at ease. I'm not like dealing with a bunch of unknowns.
mm,
Um, but also I can, you know, I, and it also depends on like what position you're going for. But let's say for concertmaster, I
mm.
know like what sort of player usually they're looking for, what kind
Right.
of lead, like what kind of playing they want to hear, like they like what level of risk or like musical risk they
Mm,
want to hear. So like all this kind of stuff you can factor in after you like sat in an audition panel and like
mm,
heard through the whole entire process.
mm,
Um, but I think doing your research on an orchestra before um, taking audition is extremely helpful. Obviously, you will never know who the panel, who's on the panel.
mhm,
At least in a U.S. orchestra, that's confidential information. Um, but you can know, like, oh, for example, like Cleveland,
mm,
extremely clean.
mm,
Philly,
mm,
super clean.
mm.
And you can listen for, and now with modern day YouTube and all this
Right.
kind of stuff and recording, like you can tell, like, oh, they do this slide here, they do this shift here, they
Mm,
do this tempo, like you can see, and also like what conductor does what. There's so much information that you can get even before you go into an audition that
mm,
like you're like, oh, if I play this way, it might actually stand out to them, and that
mm,
might surprise them that I actually know this already.
mm, mm,
Um, and therefore it makes me memorable.
mm,
And I think most like the biggest thing about being playing an audition is like making sure that people remember you
mm.
for the right reasons,
Right.
for good reasons,
Right.
not because you like totally messed up the
Yeah.
Don Juan run
Right.
of the phrase, which I have done multiple times. So it's all about preparing yourself and playing in a way that makes you stand out and makes the committee remember you after you know 30, 40 people, and then they're voting on who they want to pass. You
Mhm.
want to be the one that they remember.
Right.
So that's yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's mostly mental. It's
Mm,
mostly mental. And if you're able to calm yourself down and play uh, well and in a way that you think best represents your playing,
mm.
it's going to bring you a lot of success. And then after that, it's all luck
Yeah.
because it's you can play super well, but perhaps that's not what the committee's looking for, or perhaps you are in a group where it's like also four or five other superstar soloists like
Right, right.
nailing the crap out of everything. Like it's a lot of stuff can happen, or like it's right before lunch and the committee's like not 100% focused.
Mhm.
All this kind of stuff happens. So like you play if you're able to calm down, play how you want. The rest is up to it's not in your hands anymore. So
Right. Well, and can you talk a little bit about the difference between taking a concertmaster audition as opposed to a section audition? Because I mean, aside from the fact that you're playing more uh, concertmaster solos for these auditions,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about maybe like how you should go about playing for a concertmaster audition as opposed to a section audition?
Sure. Section audition, I definitely think you need to be more reserved and square.
Mm,
Although you still have to play musically because
mm,
in an like excerpts are still music. Like
you're right.
there's so many times we hear people just come in and it's just like metronomic and etude, like, and we're
Mm,
just like, come on, like
mm,
this is like we don't want you playing like this in the orchestra. Like we want you to phrase, we want you to play with musical integrity.
mm,
This is not like how well can you like execute. No, it's no, like you still you have to play it musically.
mm,
With concertmaster and principal type playing, I think I will definitely look and listen for like how many musical risks are you taking in your solo playing or like your Mozart or your Bach? Like how intrigued am I of your playing? Like how many like am I learning anything from the way you're playing that? And if that interests me, then you're someone I want to work with. Um, and so that's from the solo stuff and from concertmaster solos. Like if you're playing it differently than me, and it like intrigues me as well, I'm
mm.
also very interested. I'm like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it this way,
Mm,
but I might steal that from you.
mm.
That's usually like a good sign.
Yeah.
So I think if you play it, it's like please don't play it straight.
Mm,
Please don't not take risks. I want to see someone who is willing to step out of the box, out of the comfort zone, and do something like extremely well. Whether that be like playing something extremely soft, taking a lot of time, in a way that makes musical sense,
mm,
or just someone who's willing to push the boundaries and
mm,
not play cookie cutter. I think
mm.
that's the biggest difference between principal positions and section positions. Section positions you can definitely like if you play well and you
Yeah.
execute well, like
Yeah.
you'll nine times out of 10 you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But for concert or principal audition, like if you only do the cookie cutter stuff, then like
Mm,
that's definitely not enough. You have to
right.
wow us in a way that we're not even expecting to be wowed. So
Mm,
it's about bring who you are as a musician and then seeing if it fits with the current group that you're playing with.
mm. Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, it's so funny because when you were talking about like people playing very cookie cutter, I feel like it all really kind of goes back to like the psychological aspect of things where like when you're in that pressure moment and you're just like so nervous. And for a lot of people, it's like, they're at a stage in life where they're desperately needing a job, obviously. So they're in that
Yes.
position where like they're probably just predominantly thinking like, oh, I better just like not miss anything, right? And so I think just trying to get out of that headspace in an audition is such a hurdle for a lot of us as musicians. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I mean I've definitely been there too. I what motivated me to apply for orchestras was I don't know if you know Nathan. I've never told Nathan Chan this story either.
Mhm.
But I remember do you know Will Chow by any chance? He plays in the BSO now.
I've met him once, yeah.
You know the
Yeah,
name,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So Will and I are really good friends,
Mhm.
and I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story. But I think we were like 22 or 23 years old.
Mhm.
We were older kids at Curtis,
Mhm.
and we were just hanging out one day, and we were like, Nathan Chan, what the heck are you doing in Philly? Like we see him, he walks into Curtis, like, what the heck are you doing here? And he, Nathan, I can't impersonate Nathan. Nathan is Nathan.
Yeah.
Like he's just like super happy to see us, super bubbly guy, and
Yeah.
he's just like he walks up to me, he's like, oh, I was taking the Philly orchestra audition, and I didn't go very well. And I was like, oh yeah, of course it's the Philly orchestra. Like this is crazy. We're just students.
Right.
We're just like we're screwing around. And I think it was for like a title position. It was for number. I don't remember. It was like
Sure.
number 2 or number 3, something
Sure.
like that.
Yeah.
Something very prestigious. And we're just like, yeah, of course. This is like such a hard audition to get in. We're like 22 years old, Nathan. How can you like expect to like advance in an audition like this?" And he's like, just kidding. I got to the finals or something. And it was like, you little, like, are you kidding me?
Oh my
Like,
god.
first of all, super happy for the guy, but like,
Right.
that was such a shock to my system that like
Mm,
someone who's my age
right.
is able to like do so well in an audition.
Mhm.
Like, and it was definitely like, no, I was like super happy for the guy, but it
Mhm,
was
mhm.
also just like, Kevin, like, it was a reflection of like, Kevin, what are you doing? Like, you're still applying for competitions, and
Mm,
it's like, even if you win, so what? Like, it
yeah.
doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't
Right.
guarantee a
Right.
paycheck.
Right.
And I think that day, like, Will Chow and I, like, we went to some like grungy dive bar across from my apartment in Philadelphia, and we were
Mhm.
just like drinking Yinglings and like contemplating. It's like, here is Nathan Chan taking over the entire world. Like, what are we doing?
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and then like I remember that night, like I went back to my apartment and I just like applied for every job, and that's where I applied for the
Mm,
LPO job. And
mm,
I think very soon after, like thank God, very soon after I won the job for LPO,
mm.
and Will actually won the Pittsburgh job.
Right.
But I can guarantee, we like Will and I have talked about this.
Mhm.
We both, it was because Nathan Chan came in and just like totally like blew our minds
Mhm.
by doing so well in
Yeah.
these auditions. I was like, okay, we gotta start
Oh
doing this.
man.
Um,
That's yeah.
but yeah, no, but sorry, that was a
No.
total tangent.
No.
Going back to your question of, I think mentally it's just when you at least for me, I remember like getting to a place where I was so desperate to win a job that I stopped caring.
Mm,
Where it was like, this is not going to work out. I might as well just enjoy this process because I don't know how much longer I can like go through this audition process. Like, I don't know how many more
yeah.
like panels I can play in front of. I don't know,
Right.
like, this is pretty cool. Like, I'm playing in like, I don't know, Houston or Minnesota, like on
Mm,
stage. Like I don't know how many more chances I will have to like perform on a stage like this.
mm,
And like, even though this is an audition, I'm just going to enjoy my time because
mm.
like I don't know how many more opportunities like this I'm going to get.
Right.
And it's usually in that moment when you do your best work, because like you start just like playing for yourself and you start enjoying,
Yeah.
and you stop thinking about like, I have to play this piano, I have to retard here, I have to
Mhm.
I have to be extra spiccato here, I have to and all that goes out the window. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm just going to play music the way music's supposed to be played.
Right.
And then that's when you happen to do your best.
Mm,
And so I actually find usually in moments of desperation and despair
yeah.
is when at least me, like, it's just like, okay, the entire world melts away, and it's just like, okay, you know what, just this is for yourself,
Mhm.
just play for yourself. And nine times out of ten, that's when my best work happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not asking people to get to that dark of a level. But yeah, so because like that's like borderline giving up. It's like,
Right.
I'm giving up. This is like,
Yeah.
this just have one last fun with it. Just, so
Yeah.
but there are also ways of like, a lot of people like it's a taboo topic, but a lot of people take beta blockers.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's and whether that's a placebo or not, like either way it
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah.
And I'll just come out and say it. And like like a lot, for very high pressure situations, I definitely take beta blockers myself.
Sure.
I don't think it's anything that should be taboo. Like
Yeah.
we just got to be truthful with
Yeah.
who we are. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm at an age where I'm I can't play. I don't have the dexterity of like 21-year-old Kevin anymore.
Yeah.
Whether I'm nervous or not, like I sometimes, for the very soft piano spots, like I shake,
Yeah.
like I physically shake,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't want that. And like I'm gonna freak out if I shake. So like if I take like 2 to 5 milligrams of like whatever this miracle drug is, like that takes away the shake, and
Right.
also I freak out less. So
Mm.
like it's a win-win situation, and also like everyone else is taking it. So why
Right.
why wouldn't
Right.
I
Right.
level the playing field? So
Right. Right.
So that's,
Well, it's funny. Nathan was a guest on the last episode, and just kind of having gotten a chance to talk with him, that story definitely sounds like
right.
something
It's totally, yeah. And he's
Yeah.
like the most charismatic. He's like the
Right.
most charismatic individual, and
Right.
he is like taking over the world.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he's definitely, he's a role model for a lot of
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah, and I
it's kind
love
of
that
cool.
he's embraced a sense of ambassadorship as a
For
musician. Like
sure.
he really
For
loves
sure.
to represent music in the most positive light. But no, I kind of want to touch a little bit on what you were talking before about the despair, because I think, when you're in school, um you're kind of in the safe haven where, which it should be obviously, where you're just kind of told like, hey, like you do X, Y, and Z. You study with the right teacher, and they'll help you. And it's almost like to a fault, because there's almost, I mean, unless you study with maybe certain teachers, there's not like a sense of urgency that comes with school where, I mean, of course, there's a clear like, oh, you graduate here, but like, there's no one's really saying like you really should try to like, make it a goal to, have something before you graduate, right? I mean, maybe subconsciously we all would like that, but I don't know, because I think once you get out of school, it's so much harder to um like go out and take auditions. I mean, personally speaking, because it's just like
Mhm.
you're on your own, you're not playing for someone regularly. And obviously, if you don't have a job, then financially it can be difficult to take as many auditions as you want. So,
Absolutely.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you and Will were like this, but I think it's almost like school can kind of give you a sense of comfort and complacency that isn't as
Mhm.
great as one might think. Yeah,
No,
but
100%,
mm,
100%. And I think, yeah, I mean, school is definitely a safe haven. And I have to say, I'll speak personally. Like, I was very lucky. Like, Colburn, financially free. Curtis was
right,
also financially free.
right.
Curtis was also incredible. I didn't really start taking auditions till Curtis. So,
Mm.
but Curtis was amazing, where they had financial help for you to go take auditions
Oh
too.
wow. Mhm.
Yeah. So, like, they were, yeah, I owe so much of, like, not only for my musical training, but also like financial support to help me
Right.
set me up for my career. Like, they've helped me
Yeah,
out a lot.
yeah.
But I see, the thing is, like, I also knew this.
Mm,
I also knew that, like, this is a lot of money that they're like just giving you, and that are here. Like,
mm,
why wouldn't you take advantage of this?
mm.
Where, like, if you leave school, like I was doing an AD, I don't know if it's called, whatever. I was doing
Yeah, yeah,
diploma
yeah, yeah,
at Curtis.
yeah.
Um, if I leave, like, that's on me.
Mm,
And also, like, I don't have very much money. Like, when I
mm.
was a student, I didn't have much. Like,
Right.
it's so expensive to take like a flight. Like,
Right.
and you're a cellist,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like, you have to do two tickets, and I'm playing about
Right.
one.
Right.
So I think I was very aware, and Will was as well, that, like, oh shoot, like, if we don't take advantage of this now, if we don't have
Mm,
something set up, like, one, we might have to take a gap year, or like we have to just like kind of fend for ourselves, doing freelance gigs. And it's a very uncertain lifestyle. And, like,
yeah.
my whole entire thing about wanting to play in an orchestra is because the paycheck was steady. So, like,
Mm, yeah.
it almost goes completely against what like everything that I want, which is like
Yeah.
stability in my life.
Right.
um and so I definitely took advantage of, like, every program that was available, and
Mm,
I made it a goal. It's like, I need a job before I
mm.
graduate. I need a job
That's
before I
yeah.
graduate.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, and but also, it's not, a lot of teachers, and especially in institutions these days, are just like, oh no, you have to, don't think about orchestra now. You'll get it
Mm,
later. It's just like,
yeah.
just keep so. I think that is the worst advice you can
Mm,
give a
yeah.
student. It's so not practical.
Mm,
Like, there's these schools, I'm not going to name any, that, like,
sure.
that there's like, oh, we train soloists.
Mm,
was like, yeah, but you pump out 100 students a year. You're gonna train 100 soloists a year. Like this it's not feasible.
Right, right.
And yet, like they put next, like when I was there, there was like next to no emphasis on orchestral training. Like
Mm,
I've never taken at that time. I didn't take a like orchestral rep class or anything,
mm,
and I really wish I had that opportunity.
mm.
So I I wish students would push more, about with their students to do auditions and to like explore the side of orchestra. Like for example, like I don't know, so many people would be like, "Oh, I don't want to be an orchestra musician."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Where did this come from?
Right.
Where it's like, "Oh, it's not cool to play an orchestra." It's like, like I love it. Like,
Right, right.
um, but I feel like there's this stigma around like, oh, if you play an orchestra, you've like you didn't make it or something.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, these are the people that are playing into their 60s and 70s, and then the other people like switch careers.
Yeah.
So, um, so I think, yeah, I just wish schools would put more of an emphasis on like, yes, definitely push the solo and the chamber stuff because like that fits you, that betters you as a musician overall,
Mm, mm.
100%. And if you happen to make it to be a soloist or a chamber musician, or if that's like what the career path that you want to take, that
Right,
is awesome. Like
right,
I please, but like if you want like a longer career and life in music, and then definitely always consider orchestra as like a very viable option.
right. Yeah, I don't know if it's like I don't know if people over the years deliberately kind of shun the orchestra life. I feel like at least in the last 10, 20 years or so, maybe with the, you know, advent of social media, I feel like the soloist life has kind of been overly glamorized to
Oh,
where,
for sure, it's overly
yeah,
glamorized.
yeah.
Yes,
So I feel like,
definitely.
and of course now with every international competition, it's live streamed, so everyone is watching each other. So um, it's become this culture where it's both good because it's allowed for the level to be higher. Like we've never had like such high level playing, I would say,
Yeah,
objectively
yeah.
speaking, than we have now. So in that sense, it's been great, but it's also not realistic because, like you said, there's only so many, you know, gigs that a soloist can like. There's so many gigs that are out there for soloists. So not everyone is going to have those opportunities, and it's really like winning a lottery. Like it's not like
Hmm.
one thing that leads to you being a
Yep,
soloist. Like there's so many
hundred
different
percent.
factors. So yeah,
Yeah, and a
yeah,
lot of times the soloists that are on the circuit today like didn't win a competition,
sure, yeah,
and
yeah,
even if you win a competition, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a successful solo career.
mm,
So
yeah,
and there's so many like instances of like principal players in an orchestra who are
mm,
now soloists,
mm,
or vice versa.
right,
Uh, so you know, doing competitions is not the only way to be successful in music by
right,
any means.
right, yeah. And just quickly, speaking about Curtis, because you said you did like a AD. I think since you've left, they have implemented a master's program, which I
I think
think,
so. I
yeah,
think so.
I
Yeah.
was like so shocked by. It. I was like, whoa! Like Curtis was always like a diploma or a bachelor's school, so
Yeah.
that was really
Yeah.
interesting to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Um.
sure. I definitely probably I don't know. I feel like growing up in an Asian household, like collecting the degrees is probably quite fun. I probably would have gone for the masters if I could have,
Yeah.
but I definitely remember it was not an option
Right.
when I was there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving along a little bit. So as a concertmaster, you're afforded so many incredible solos. From the works by Strauss, obviously, and Rimsky-Korsakov. So many composers, obviously, wrote incredible solos for concertmasters. Um, First, can you maybe share with us your favorite concertmaster solo? And second, can you maybe touch on what it's like, or the difference between playing a concertmaster solo, a big concertmaster solo, as opposed to playing a concerto with an orchestra. Because I remember the few times that I sat principal cello and I had like that 6 bar solo for the Firebird, that was like top five like scariest moments of my life. So like I can kind of understand like what that's like to play solos within an orchestra. So like I'd love to
Mhm.
just hear your take on that. So
Sure. Okay. So your first question was what was my
concertmaster
favorite
solo, yeah,
concertmaster
yeah.
solo? Okay. I haven't played I've so Heldenleben I think is my number one.
Mm.
Although I have not played it in a concert setting. I've like done it as part of like a finals of a concertmaster audition where I've like played through the entire concertmaster
Mhm. Sure,
excerpts
sure.
with the orchestra, but I haven't done it in a concert yet, and I will next season because it's programmed
Perfect.
on the ISS.
Yay.
So I'm like
Yeah.
really excited about it. Yeah, next season, I think next season's nuts. I'm doing Scheherazade,
Mm.
Heldenleben, and then Mozart 3 with Nick McGinn, and that's in consecutive weeks or something like that.
Wow.
I was like, I'm ready. I'm excited for it, but it's
Yeah.
also like I'm definitely taking a vacation after those. But it would have to be Heldenleben and probably also Sprague.
Okay. Yeah.
Because like the two violin solo thing throughout the entire piece, that is so cool,
Mm.
so cool. And
Mm.
as someone that loves like really thick harmonies, like all
Mm.
this kind of stuff, oh, it's
Mm.
amazing. And then your second question was like what is it? How's it different than playing solo?
Yeah.
Um, I actually don't think it's very different. You're just sitting down. You should treat it the same. I think it's for example, like let's just take Heldenleben for example. You are given so many liberties during the recitative sections, but then there are also sections in the concertmaster solo where you're playing with someone else in the orchestra, and then so therefore you are almost you have to follow the conductor and you
Mm.
have to kind of weave your solo in and around what you see on the podium and what you
Mm.
hear from your colleagues. Um, but this is the kind of stuff that you should be doing as a soloist too. Like I'm not the
Mm.
biggest fan of soloists that just like, oh, this is the way I'm gonna play, you're gonna follow me.
Mm.
Like, come on. Like
Mm.
if you're a really good soloist, like I've heard some of the best soloists in the world, they're still incredibly collaborative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they're just like, oh, you're gonna play it like this? Oh, cool. Okay, I'm gonna react off of what you're playing, and I'm gonna play it like this. That
Mm.
fits into what you're doing as well.
Mm.
Like that kind of stuff really impresses me. Like
Yeah.
solos that can also be collaborative.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing with concertmaster solos is like you're definitely the soloist for like the 30 seconds or in some cases 5 to 10 minutes and Heldenleben. Um, but you have to do it in a way where it's collaborative with your colleagues, and it could be different every time. The conductor might want to do it slightly different and just have to think on your feet. Um, you know, some random player might have missed an entrance and is like coming in a
Mm.
little bit more
Mm.
hurriedly, and
Mm.
you have to react to that. And you
Right.
can also play it slightly different to kind of make everything make sense.
Mm.
So it's just collaboration on the highest level, and then you have to like make your line as soloistic and as shiny as possible. So
Mm.
it's so much fun just thinking
Yeah.
about it, just like having to be collaborative but also be the soloist at the same time like
Mhm.
that. And when one pulls that off successful, that is
Yeah.
like the best feeling in the world. That's
Yeah.
what gets me. That I think that's what keeps me in this profession, is just like when things come together in the heat of the moment in concert, and it's like different every time, and it still comes off, and it surprises me. It's like, wow, that was really
Mhm.
cool that we did it
Yeah.
this way.
Yeah.
That's such a high. Like
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and just kind of going back to, I think what's so scary or challenge, at least for me, from my perspective, with my very limited experience, about playing like a solo within an orchestra, like as a principal or concertmaster, is you're kind of playing two different roles where you're playing within the section, obviously, and then all of a sudden, like it's your time to play the solo. So it's like having to kind of
Mm.
switch from back and forth. Like, I don't know if that's
No.
something that you've kind of um developed a strategy for, or like you're just so used to
Yeah,
doing it.
I think I'm used to it at this point, but it
Mhm.
definitely is like there's orchestral playing where
Right,
a lot of time it may be sul tasto, like
right,
over the fingerboard, slightly softer playing.
yeah,
And then when the solo comes, you suddenly switch gears. It's like a switch, and
yeah,
then you
yeah.
just like you play totally differently. And then
Mhm.
as soon as the solo is done, you switch it back off, and then you
Right.
back into orchestra mode.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's just like any good principal, or you have to learn how to navigate between those two, pretty instantaneously.
Yeah,
And once you figure that out, because like we all know, like as
yeah.
string players, you know how to like jump up, above the crowd when you need
Hmm.
to, and
Hmm.
then like you know how to hide and you know mesh with the other players when you need to. So
Yeah,
it's just knowing when and where to do it.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, would you mind just sharing some final imparting words of wisdom with the audience, especially those that are in their early stages of their musical journey?
Mm. Um, yeah, don't worry about it. Like it's a process, and life in music will take you to places you never expected. And the thing is, your career path will never turn out the way you are currently thinking about it. Like I have no idea what my life will be in 5 to 10 years, but if you told me when I was younger or when I was in school that I would be where I am now, I would never believe I would never believe anybody. Um, and I am a serial overthinker. I stress myself out. I go in these deep spirals all the time, and like I'm just like everyone else. Um, I think it's important to learn to let go and just like enjoy what you're doing. And
Mhm.
if what you're doing is good, you will be noticed.
Mhm. That's
Um,
great. Yeah.
and also, yeah, just enjoy the entire process because like one day this will end. Like, no, like
Yeah.
we're all
Yeah.
musicians. Like
Right.
there's a timeline as to like when we're at our peak and when we're performing really well. The human body deteriorates.
Right.
So enjoy playing really well, play for yourself, enjoy what you're doing, and then let like life take its course
Yeah.
because you never know what direction it's going to push you in.
Mhm.
And I'm an optimist, so
Mhm.
I believe that there's a place for everybody in this world, and it'll if you enjoy what you're doing, you'll fall right into where you want to be.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know we're in like completely different parts of the world right now, and I know how
Yeah.
big you are. So
No,
I just
all good, all good.
appreciate, yeah, no, I appreciate you making this time. So uh, until next time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.